he's always been at the forefront, I think, of like predicting what's coming in technology, and he's an amazing technologist, product designer, and the cool thing is we connected on technology. So how I connected with Will, even though we wrote a bunch of music and made no tech products together originally, was actually because I had been working and designing this product called the ROLI Seaboard, which of course is a music making product, and I got the opportunity to go and show it to him down in Chiswick, where he does a lot of work. And from that point onwards, you know, I think there was an immediate connection, obviously because we made music, and obviously he's far superior to me on that front. And then on the technology front, we're both builders and we're both like creative thinkers around technologies.
I'm your host, Charlotte Krol, and in each episode, I dive deep into the mind and processes of creatives who are redefining what it is to make in the digital age. Today, I'm here with Manon Dave. Hello.
Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm feeling good. It's a nice day today, Friday. Big ups the whole crew at Digital Frontier. Thank you for having me here.
I had a look at your CV and my mind was blown.
Yeah.
Was blown. You seem to hold about 10 current positions, either being a founder or, you know, creative direction, or, you know, you're a songwriter and you're a producer for Universal Music Publishing. I suppose, could you give us something of an abridged version of who you are and what you do in your professional career?
Yeah, so my name is Manon Dave. Dave is my last name, believe it or not. I can explain that some other time, I guess. And yeah, the way I like to describe it is really, I write songs and I make cool stuff. I do that mostly as, a kind of creative engineer of sorts, if you like. I do a bunch of product design. I've spent 20 years in the product and tech world. And but I've always been a creative at heart, like a lot of people, and I've always just been really passionate about making stuff, and that really kind of manifested itself as making music originally, and so I've just continued that on. And
obviously creativity is in your bones. Can you remember when that started to crystallize? Was this, as a kid, were you making things? Were you writing music, from a young age?
Yeah, I was. I mean, like honestly, I think, and this is maybe talks to the fact that I've still been so passionate about technology and really tried to fuse the two, but I was never really good at playing a particular instrument or drawing or painting, or I was kind of average at most things, but I really learned a lot of the skills, if you like, or ways to execute the things that I thought were good through technology. So even when I made music early on, I think I started around 14, 15 years old, it was a bunch of failed guitar lessons, piano lessons, being not very good at singing and all the rest of it. And in the end, I actually learned how to make music through pretty much pixel painting on a piece of software on my computer. And so that's...
Pixel painting?
Yeah, or the equivalent of. There's something called MIDI, which people use in the music world. It's a protocol that allows kind of computers to understand musical notation. And I couldn't really play very well, but I found a piece of software called FL Studio, which I downloaded at the time, and I had realized that I could actually just draw notes into and melodies into the piano roll in this window where you can pretty much draw in sequence the notes you want to play. And it's the early stuff, which I thought was so good. I was sure I was going to be Dr. Dre. I could listen back to now, and it sounds probably like a kind of polyphonic ringtone from like the Crazy Frog era. But yeah, it was that's how I learned. I learned very visually, and I think that's been kind of consistent in my kind of creative journey, and accepting and understanding myself as a creative person, despite working a lot of my career in a very technical field.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose with the pixel sort of art music making,
yeah.
is this something that predates modern DAW kind of technology? Was that stuff in existence, but you just weren't exploring it at that age?
Yeah, so FL Studio was a DAW, or is a DAW, I should say, and it really was that. That was kind of like slightly before that, when I was even younger, I think was the advent of this kind of DAW-based music making with MIDI as this kind of core protocol. And but when I started making music, I think it was super rare at the time for people to make entire productions, compositions, songs, whatever you want to call it, only through that method. Like it would normally be, you'd play stuff. It's kind of like filming and editing, right? Like you'd play stuff, you record stuff, and then the DAW is really the digital audio workstation where you would splice things up, edit, like refine, mix, master, etc., arrange, and so on. But it was quite rare. At least I remember it being very rare for folks to just be entirely in the DAW with no additional physical equipment other than a keyboard and mouse, pretty much composing or writing songs. So yeah, that was a crazy period, and I wasn't very good, to be honest, for the first few years, and then I got better over time. And I think around the time, sort of back end of university, I started to see a few more folks doing that out in the wild. As I started to get into the music industry, there was a few other people like Avicii and Daniel Bedingfield, who's a friend of mine now, who was famously one of the first people to have a #1 record with a song he made in his bedroom. So yeah, some interesting.
The original bedroom producer, songwriter.
He was definitely one of them. Yeah. During that period, I mean, he was definitely a pace setter for us in the UK.
I'm just remembering now. I used at school Cubase and Sibelius, I think it was.
Sibelius,
called.
yeah. That was a notation software.
Yeah.
Cubase as well. That's kind of what we learnt on. Yeah, we learnt on Cubase in school as well. And again, I was just not very good at it. And a lot of it was, if you remember, you'd hit record and then you'd play something and then you'd get it wrong and you'd sort of be encouraged to play it again. But actually, you could probably have fixed a bunch of stuff in the workstation. But that goes to, it's a whole other topic. But music education as well, I think, has been a big area that I've been passionate about trying to address, because there are so many other ways. Like I actually get to have somewhat of a career in music, which seemed kind of impossible when I realized that I wasn't very good at playing any instruments or doing anything that felt like really being a musician. But you can. Well,
we can talk more about the education aspects later in our conversation. Just tell me about some of your collaborators you've worked with and still do. Work with plenty of A-listers, big names like Idris Elba and will.i.am, and you've worked with brands like Google and Apple, and then down to smaller educational altruistic partnerships. I suppose, which ones stick out for you and why? Like, what are the ones that you would tell somebody that you've just met who's wanting to learn a bit about your professional career? What are the ones that you would highlight to them and why?
I think it's like, obviously everyone that you mentioned, like it's, I kind of smirk to myself every time those names are mentioned, because it still feels weird to me that, that I've had the opportunity to work with those people and those companies. But I think if I was to do what you said and talk to somebody who I just met or who was even interested in any of this stuff, I think I would much more highlight the kind of random journey of like bumping into stuff and ending up on the right course rather than the individuals, and they were a big part of it. But I think just I guess one anecdote is I was making music in my bedroom on MySpace, uploading stuff to MySpace back in the day in Kingston University. And I was doing this while studying my course or whatever. And a song that I wrote, or a bunch of songs that I'd written with this artist in Australia, one of them ended up on the Japanese bonus track of her album, as the Japanese bonus track on her album.
Would we know this artist?
You probably would. Her name was Chanel. She was signed to, she at the time signed to EMI. And so she was plucked out of, I think, Perth, Australia, and moved to New York. And I just sort of took a punt on going to New York on my student loan and sitting around until somebody spoke to me. And whatever, I ended up with this song on the Japanese bonus track of her album. Off the back of that, though, just sharing my music amongst that community all of a sudden that had been opened up to me, I ended up getting a couple more opportunities, and some of my music got put onto television shows at the time, which I didn't understand the magnitude of. TV shows like Heroes and Gossip Girl and things like that back in 2007, 2008. Then there was a big writer's strike. So I returned to the UK. I have to now get a real job because I've obviously, it's pre-WeTransfer, so it's not like even remote working exists. And I end up getting a job in an affiliate marketing company because I was like, all my friends were doing engineering jobs in investment banks or whatever, and I just wanted to be just anything remotely creative. And at the time, affiliate marketing seemed infinitely more creative to me than than those other things. So I did that, but to your point, the thing that happened the night before I started my first job was crazy. A friend of mine who was in the another kind of aspirational creative who was in the TV industry told me he was moonlighting for Channel 4, filming a BTS kind of documentary on the new Danny Boyle film. And he was like, there's this composer and like, you know, he's from India. And I was like, oh, I know an Indian guy who makes music. And I was like, all right, thanks for that. And he said to me, this guy wants to meet you. And I'm like, well, who is it? And he goes, it's A.R. Rahman. And A.R. Rahman, for those people who don't know, it's basically sold more records than the Beatles back in the day. And well, now even more. He's an iconic Indian musician composer. It's like saying to me that, hey, like there's this guy, he plays guitar really well and writes songs and he wants to meet you. He heard about you. His name's Prince. That's basically what that conversation was, right? So I go to this random house in Tufnell Park. I meet A.R. Rahman and I'm obviously awestruck. And for my family in particular, who were like, what the hell is this music thing you're doing? That completely changed their perception. But I still went to work the next day. And for the next 10 years, my life was this weird kind of parallelized thing of like working with Oscar-winning composers and Grammy-winning producers to write songs because they felt I was maybe good enough to maybe be in the room or whatever. And at the same time, growing a career in technology through ad tech, later on music tech, and then so on. So I think, although all of those names have played a big part in my career, I think it's that, I would say it's the sort of pursuit of just like doing the thing regardless of the outcome and just blindly pursuing the fact that I needed to stay creative. And yeah, all of those fine people and companies have given me the privilege of collaborating with them along the way.
Oh, that's brilliant. And we were talking earlier about some of your songwriting. As I mentioned, you're signed to Universal Music Publishing. You've written for Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
Tell me some of the songs that we might know.
Yeah. So famously, and will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas would say this if he was here, that we ended up writing like I think 3 or 4 years worth of songs. I think probably on his hard drive there might be close to 2 or 3 albums worth of songs that we've co-written together.
This is a scoop, guys.
For this Black Eyed Peas record. And he would just not put them out. Frustratingly, he just wouldn't put them out. And one of the songs, this is at a time when he is on The Voice still, but at the time, this is like 2014, 15, 16, around there. Even as far as 2017. But one of the songs that did come out, that he ended up, I think, almost inventing or writing on the spot on The Voice, a song called Fire. If anybody remembers that.
I do remember it, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember he was on TV on the Saturday going fire, 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 whatever, on The Voice. I get the call on the Monday, hey, you and my friends, Marco and Jack Parisi, awesome producers, the 3 of us, we went in, I think on the Monday, we wrote this song with him, and then on Wednesday we went in and finished it. And we were like, when is this coming out? And he goes, this weekend. And we're like, what? He goes, yeah, come to the show. Then I think on Friday he went to Coronation Street set to shoot the video. And on Saturday he performed it. So that was very surreal. So that was one of the songs that did come out. Another song that you can actually, if you listen very closely, you can hear my voice on as a background vocal, is a song called Explosion from the Masters of the Sun album. I think it was on the Masters of the Sun album. Mm-hmm. So that's another song I wrote. And on that Masters of the Sun album, actually, 5 or 6 songs, we, one form or another, we contributed to producing or writing or, So a bunch of those and a bunch that haven't come out yet.
Okay. Are there any upcoming songs that you can talk about?
Oh, yeah. So, I'm not sure I can talk about them, but I will tell you this, like since then and in recent times, I've had the privilege of working with a bunch of different people. Myself and Idris Elba actually have been making a lot of music, and we had a song out called Biggest, which was on the iPhone 14 ad. And since then...
You wrote that with him?
Yeah.
I love that song.
Do you actually?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me and Idris.
That's so cool.
So yeah, we did that. We did that in my mum's back garden, actually, in St Neots, Cambridgeshire. So
you didn't also write, is it Bosey?
Oh, I didn't do Boasty. I didn't do Boasty.
Boasty, that's a tune.
Yeah, that predates me, but what a massive tune.
It really
And actually,
is.
that introduced me a lot to Idris's music world,
Yeah,
to be honest.
yeah.
So I did Biggest, and now coming up, look, I've had, I won't say too much, but let's just say if you go onto my Instagram, which is @Manon Dave, soft plug, you might see a couple of pictures with some fine gentlemen, including one or two with Snoop Dogg.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So there may be some music coming out, and I may or may not have much more to say about it.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And tell me about your relationship with will.i.am. I think you are kind of his go-to AI innovator type consultant, would we say?
I wouldn't say go-to, only because he himself is his own go-to AI kind of, I guess, he's really a forecaster, really weirdly a kind of almost Nostradamus of what might happen. I don't know if you know this, but there's a music video, there's a Black Eyed Peas music video. I think it might be the I'm a Bee video. At the beginning of this video, and this is like 2014 or something, right? Maybe even earlier. It might even be 2010. At the beginning of this video, he sort of sat around this desk and he calls the Black Eyed Peas over. He's like, guys, check this out. And he's like, check out my new AI. Like I just type and tell it what kind of music, what kind of beat I want, and then it makes the beat. And I remember distinctly people sort of like, everyone loves the record, I think, people sort of mocking Will back in the day, like, this crazy guy, man. He's like always doing something weird with technology, always predicting the future. And of course, lo and behold, now we have generative music. And
got
so
Suno and Darcy and all kinds
Udio and all that stuff, right? And so, look, he's always been at the forefront, I think, of like predicting what's coming in technology. And he's an amazing technologist, product designer. And the cool thing is we connected on technology. So how I connected with Will, even though we wrote a bunch of music and made no tech products together originally, was actually because I had been working and designing this product called the ROLI Seaboard, which of course is a music making product, and I got the opportunity to go and show it to him down in Chiswick, where he does a lot of work. And from that point onwards, you know, I think there was an immediate connection, obviously because we made music, and obviously he's far superior to me on that front. And then on the technology front, we're both builders and we're both like creative thinkers around technology. So we never actually collaborated on technology until a couple of years ago, when he called me and we had the opportunity to work on something called Mercedes Sound Drive. And
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So just explain what it is. As I understand it, it adapts to your environment while you're driving. The music that you're playing, it kind of, if you're going over a particularly noisy, bumpy road, it dynamically adjusts. Is that correct? Is that a simplified explanation?
It's a good explanation, but it's actually it's so cool because it's so much more dynamic than I think people even imagine when they hear about it the first time. So the idea stemmed from the fact that Will has a great relationship with Mercedes, and they approached him about essentially making vroom vroom sounds in electric cars, right? And a lot of other companies were doing that. And so, Will started to dream up what could it be like if we decided to not just emulate a regular kind of V8 engine or whatever, but really create a different kind of human connection to the vehicle, right? A different kind of sonic response and kind of haptic response to the vehicle. And then kind of over the course of a year and a bit, through prototypes and whatever, emerged the idea of Sound Drive. And what Sound Drive actually is essentially it's a music mode in the car, like radio or like Bluetooth or whatever. You switch on Sound Drive, and Sound Drive takes the music you're listening to, and the tech we built basically absorbs the live data from your car that normally would just go into like diagnostics, such as, you know, your steering, your acceleration, brakes, suspension, and a few other parameters from the car that would otherwise just be logged for data's sake. But we actually we kind of interpolate that into musical data. So we take the music you're listening to, and we adapt or even remix your music in real time based on the style of your driving. So it's real time manipulation. It's almost instantaneous in terms of if you swing left, you might hear the horn section come in. As you accelerate and go through the gears, you know, you'll hear the bass line or the rumble of the bass line instead of the rumble of the engine.
Oh, that's cool.
And the drums kind of unpack themselves as you sort of start to reach the speed limit. And once you're close to the speed limit, you kind of hear the song in its fullest in the way that you would normally experience it. But yeah, the idea is that it's an adaptable driving experience.
And this product, does it only exist in Mercedes cars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was an exclusivity with Mercedes. Later in 2025, that exclusivity expires, and I think hopefully a few more car manufacturers adopt it. But with the relationship that Will's had with Mercedes, and it's been awesome to kind of partner with them, it's rolling out in all of the capable Mercedes vehicles, EQEs, EQSs, and a few of the combustion engines.
Let's talk about your working relationship with Idris Elba and the, I suppose, the partnership, but some of the things you founded together.
It's called Form from Less.
Form from Less, that's it.
Yeah, and we launched it in November 2024. I was at Web Summit, and we launched it there. And yeah, Form from Less was really, I think, the inevitable result of a few years of collaboration between me and Idris. Now, we started because, well, he got me signed to Universal Music via Seven Wallace, his publishing company. But at the same time, he saw that I had designed this instrument that was actually in his studio at the time. So we started getting to talk.
Was this the ROLI?
This was actually something called Machine by Native Instruments. So I worked at Native Instruments in Berlin for a couple of years and made this kind of music making piece of kit electronic music producers use a lot.
Specifically like for drum patterns or anything?
Yeah, it was kind of inspired by the MPC, which was used in hip hop music quite a lot back in the day. I could never afford one, so inevitably I ended up going and working for Native Instruments, and my team at the time built this thing called Machine, which looks similar to the MPC. It's a pad controller. Yeah. A lot of electronic producers use it. DJs use it a lot, and it was in his studio, and so we got to talking, and I explained actually my background in technology and engineering and design. And over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've collaborated on many fronts. We built an app together called Talking Scripts.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
So we built Talking Scripts, which is him and our co-founder on that, Stefan Schwartz, who is a director. He directed The Boys for Amazon and amongst other things, Luther as well. They both have dyslexia, and so they were very interested in finding a way to create an app that would almost turn a script into something like an audio play or an audio book, but with the opportunity to really craft characters in a way that the director or the writer intended. So Talking Scripts is live. It's on the App Store. So that was one of the first things that we did together. Now, in the upcoming releases, it certainly goes beyond any limitation of those typical character size.
Right.
So it will kind of like. Yeah, it will kind of carry characters through different scenes or whatever and introduce new characters. It can also, it will just learn, it kind of understands the syntax of a script, so it will just create, an audio version of that. You can tweak characters and so on. And with all of the emergence of some of the new kind of voice AI technology, it's sort of moving more also into the world of like helping people craft characters and tweak scripts as well as consume them from the production side. So that was one of the things we worked on. And then, of course, Idris has this huge endeavor in Africa under his company, the Akuna Group. And so he and I started working together and collaborating with various folks, including the Stellar Development Foundation, which is a blockchain development company that encouraged the use of blockchain for this type of stuff. And what we ended up doing was building a digital wallet for Africa called Akuna Wallet. This is why I stayed here in Shoreditch last night. We spent the whole day yesterday talking about the rollout of this digital wallet. It's already launched in Ghana to some beta testers, which has gone super well. Now we're looking to roll it out further. And this is really the first piece in, I think, his mission to kind of erect the creative industry in sort of a new and innovative and kind of flag-bearing way across the African continent. And that's a lot of the work that I've been doing with him, is really building technology products and creatively driven technology products for the creative industries in Africa. And Form from Less was more of a thing where, you know, all the other stuff I've been doing and all the other stuff that kind of comes across his desk, where often people want him to participate in, let's say, a brand activity, but he's another multifaceted creative who has ideas and is innovative and so on. So to find a home for folks like us who typically are underrepresented also in the creative industries, to be able to participate in building those stories out through technology for a lot of these brands, that's kind of why we built that.
That's really cool. I'm going to keep an eye on the Acuna group.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's...
No, that's really a big part of the mission, is just to really empower particularly the creative industries in Africa, but also adjacent kind of, I would say, what we might call culturally relevant industries. So like sports is another one. And one of the other big endeavors that we have there is Idris and I kind of co-invested in a company called AfriScout, which we came across. Really innovative company run by a guy called Namdi in Nigeria. And this is 4K cameras on grassroots football pitches using computer vision to track the ball and track various players. No person required to operate this thing. It aggregates all of the data that it analyzes from these games, from 12 to 18-year-old kids, and uploads it all to this platform. And we've had clients, you know, from the German Premier League, the Premier League here in the UK, in England, sorry, you know, across Europe really. And last summer, a player was scouted and signed by OG Nice, the French club, which was one of the first signings that was done off the platform. But this is, again, innovation and empowerment, I think, of folks in Africa, where, you know, obviously there's a lot of boundary to entry when it comes to sports people from that region coming to Europe.
Cool. That's really cool. Let's dig a bit into your skill set. You hold degrees in computing with business management, I believe, and artificial intelligence. So
boring.
Well, is it? I don't know. You tell me. Yeah, I'm thinking, did you learn coding? Anything like that? Like, did you get a pretty thorough understanding of machine learning? Like, how did you enter this world of creative technology?
Yeah.
With confidence that you could develop products, you know, had you learned stuff at the university level, and then you've since built on that, essentially?
So I remember desperately wanting to do a music-related degree coming out of high school or A-levels. I remember finding this course called sound engineering at the time, and I was like, all right, it's got engineering in the title, so I'll be all right. So I just tell my dad about it, and I remember my dad telling me basically, all right, well, listen, how about this instead? I'll buy you a guitar and you can busk at High Barnet Tube Station, and if you can pay the rent by busking, then you can do whatever you want. And I obviously knew that I couldn't play the guitar, so I went to university to study computing with business management instead. And so look, technology was something I liked, I was passionate about, and I was good at, I guess, in one way or another. And yeah, so I studied, you know, at university. Obviously, you're learning how to code and all those kind of good things, but I still didn't see the path to creative technology in any way, to be honest, at university, and I wasn't as engaged as I could have been and whatever. But it was really later in my career, after sort of the ad tech part of my career, 4 or 5 years, actually in this part of London, working on that stuff, building behavioral retargeting algorithms and all that kind of stuff, when the EU cookie law came about, and it was like, yeah, like things were in turmoil for a little while in the industry. Now we just accept the cookies anyway. But at the time I was like, I need to like cleanse my soul. What do I do? And I found out that, you know, there's this opportunity in Berlin to actually take my very skills of product management within a software or technical environment, my average coding skills, my okay product design skills, and actually applying them to the industry that, you know, meant something to me. And this is one of the things I think people don't realize, is that, like, even if you work in, you know, technology, or you're a lawyer or you're an accountant, everything we use requires all of those functions. Like, so I just didn't, for some reason, it didn't hit me until that point. And that's kind of how I think embarked on fusing creativity and technology, was once I got out to Berlin and started to realize that I can really contribute through my day job, if you wanted to call it that at the time, to the very creation of the tools that I use for all the other stuff I love doing, now that can be applied to anywhere. And so, so I think that's really where the connection happened. And then later on, I did, I think I partly got lucky, but also I think I saw the value of everything that I was doing from the ad tech world with machine learning starting to be applied in the consumer space and the creator space, to take machine learning and turn it into tools for folks to shortcut different things we were doing. And AI, that was the precursor to AI as we know it today, right? So,
particularly the generative AI
exactly.
boom. Yeah.
I mean, arguably, all the behavioral retargeting stuff we did, where we stalk you around the internet and show you ads on YouTube, is generative AI, because it's really showing you what is most relevant to you for that given moment in time and predicting your actions. So the same apparatus or the same mechanics apply to now, obviously, the much more sophisticated way what's happening with Gen AI. So that was really my pursuit of those things, and why and how I think I started to connect the dots on it.
Which years or year were you there?
That was like 2012 to 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, it can be quite daunting if you're a creative person who's predominantly got a humanities background, to be seeing all these generative AI tools crop up in music making and visual design and all sorts, graphic design. I suppose, what would you say to somebody who's a bit nervous to experiment or is a bit turned off by AI and other digital technologies? Like, how would you sort of encourage them to give it a try, or even like fully embrace it? How would you would you encourage them, or would you encourage them?
Yeah, I definitely would. I'm an optimist when it comes to this stuff, to be completely honest. And as I explained earlier, like, I think it's a big part of it is down to the fact that I could not be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for technology. Like, I just am not a good musician in the traditional sense, right? So, or in the, if you ask me to pick up an instrument and play, I can't do it. And a lot of people would say, yeah, that means you're not a musician. And I think that's a completely fair enough position to have. But I do think that ultimately, throughout history, it's technology that's kind of become the great enabler. And it's allowed people's ideas to bubble to the surface, and better ideas inevitably result in, I think, better experiences, products, music, art, whatever it is, that you're producing. So I think that you have to see it as, at the very least, you have to see it as a new type of tool that can help you achieve your goals in a more efficient or even a higher quality way. But I would go a bit further and say it's not really a tool even. It's more of a collaborator. It's more of a sounding board. It's more of an echo chamber with amplification of of the best idea you have, if you like. So, or a thing that can kind of course correct your thinking, or even offer a new perspective. So I think really it's about seeing it as that. It's not in some cases it can be the finisher. It's that, it can be the thing that can take a bunch of admin off your desk, and it can make, it can do the billing or the invoices or fixing the document or whatever. But in the creative process, I think it's more about being a source for pushing your ideas in different directions, or stretching and bending and even breaking your thoughts about what you're currently working on. So I would say, get into it, use it, leverage it, and try and see what purpose it fulfills for you. But I do think that we're entering a world now, or entering a period, in human history, where these things are going to feel like second nature. It's going to be like the undo button. There was no undo button when you were doing calligraphy in the 1600s. So you're going to have to start using it if you want to get the best out of your own time and out of your own ability.
It also feels like, with this democratized access, I suppose, to creative tools.
Yeah.
Is that, in a way, if everybody, well, not everybody, but if there's like greater numbers of people making music or designing stuff or making films, is that, in a way, the more core human creativity will be prized better? So it's like, yes, you use the AI as a tool to make things more efficient, or, like you said, perhaps produce higher quality output, but actually it might push us more to think even more originally as humans. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, look, I think you can take parallels from whatever scientific discoveries. You know what I mean? Once we discover something new, you're forced to ask different questions, right? And I think that that's the same when it comes to this. You know, it feels like, again, taking something like my music making journey, it's not that guitarists and pianists and violinists and drummers and all of those people are somehow less valuable. They're not. It's not that they're less valuable. It's just that somebody who doesn't have access to those people or can't afford to have those sessions or frankly sonically doesn't feel that it's required for their art can still make something of their idea with value, you know, and to a certain standard. That's what the technology allowed folks like me to do. And I think the same goes for a lot of this new crop of tools. I'm not a filmmaker by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like I have a good curatorial eye, and I like to, you know, create things visual first, even if I'm making music, as I mentioned. So I've been giving it a try. You know, I've been making little fun like trailers and whatever I can with the AI tools that exist. And that's not to say I'm Spielberg, but what it does allow me to do is it allows me to convey my idea in the highest possible resolution, and arguably is better than other ideas. Whether, you know, I'm not saying that it is, but it could be, right? And I think we enter a space then, to your point, where I've been saying on stage a little bit controversially, but also to kind of like spark the debate, that we're exiting the skills era respectfully, and we're entering the imagination era. Like, and I think it's like skills are cute, but like imagination is everything, and the best ideas really are the currency. I feel moving forward.
That's a great answer. That's a very inspiring answer. Thank you. On that note, what are some of your go-to AI tools that you're using? So in music making, for instance, and the little like trailers you've been making.
Yeah, so I mean, I did this on stage the other day at the Women of the Future event. It was a lot of fun. And I just, you know, I tried to recreate this like 1 hour like sandbox trailer that I made with people's ideas from the crowd. And and this is really the workflow on stage. What I showed was exactly what I normally have open on my laptop with the tabs. It's, you know, I use some kind of LLM, ChatGPT or FYI, to maybe bounce around quick ideas or whatever. I use Midjourney for a lot of the image creation, although ChatGPT's new image creation tool came out and it's been very impressive, but I still like Midjourney. I think it's just, I know how to operate it to get what I want. I take the Midjourney images, I run them through Runway, which is turns image to video. You can be very specific about camera movements and motion. Then there's a really cool tool called Hedra, which allows you to take image or video or text prompt and lip sync it with audio, which could be your own audio script that you've recorded or typed, or it could be a generative one that is taken from a prompt or adapted your voice to a different voice or whatever. So it'll produce the video with the image from Midjourney, but lip syncing the actual dialogue, which is pretty crazy. And then I use, you know, Udio or Suno to inspire my music making. I have to be a little bit, I need some street cred, so I can't like just say I'm like printing music out here. But I oftentimes I use Suno Audio to not only just like create individual tracks or instruments, or take my lyrical idea and turn it into something more, you know, something more consumable, but actually a really cool hack with the music AI stuff is creating your own samples. So a lot of the time, you know, I come from the hip hop era, and a lot of the music I make is within that vein, and sampling is, you know, widely known to be an art form in and of itself. But obviously you can run into a lot of like licensing issues and so on. But what's really fun recently is like creating, using the AI tools, music that feels aesthetically like something you would sample. So it could be from something like the soul era, Motown era, to kind of Baroque classical music or whatever, making something that's completely original and generated, but then taking that into like a sampling creative workflow and making something completely original from it. So those are sort of the ways that I've been playing with AI.
That's cool. Love it.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any exciting emerging technologies cropping up that you believe are going to gear shift things within music making, filmmaking, TV design or otherwise, which is perhaps going to take a bit of a turn away from generative AI? I mean, this makes me sound like I'm asking you a question to predict a future that's really, really hard to envisage. But are you seeing any little trends bubbling up or emerging technology where you think this is the next thing on from, text to image generation or generative AI music making?
I think anybody who's like starting to really harness. Actually, let me step back. So like, there's AI models. AI models, I think, will start to become commoditized a little bit because, yes, they're expensive to build and train and all that stuff. But now there's many of them emerging, and they'll still be the winners. They'll still be the ones that have just had longer or have more money or have more resources or have more data or whatever that allow them to be richer in their outputs or more accurate. But, and a lot of people have been talking about agentic AI and this idea of there being this world where we have a specific set of agents that are actually far more focused on a very niche outcome. And I do think that's true, and I do think that's around the corner. And I think that agentic AI wave will probably replace the way that we see apps in many ways. And there'll be like an agent that is really good at making, like the drummer agent that makes drum tracks or whatever for my thing, right? So I think we'll have those.
And for browsing the web, right?
Yeah, exactly. Personalized search experiences or the deep research function that ChatGPT have as a deep research function for a specific industry or specific outcome. So I think that's right around the corner. But I think that this step away from applications or apps, I think will eventually result not in the agent replacing the apps, but I think in combination with AI models being available offline and on chip and or within your private cloud, which a lot of the big companies have started to already move towards, I think that will mean that ultimately the nature of the operating system will change, and you'll have an OS that is really personalized and dedicated to your goals and your outcomes. And so at the OS layer, if you're also now, imagine there was an operating system that was the best at functioning, an operating system that was best at the functions that you required, rather than an operating system that you could install any app on. If there was one that really adapted and molded around the way that you use your devices, then I think you'd be able to really change your workflow or adapt your work, or it would adapt to your workflow very specifically. And the thing that you engage with is ultimately the operating system. Everything else is kind of invisible. The agents or whatever are invisible.
I'm just going to note down this $1 million idea of yours.
So I think that's kind of where it's headed. And then look, blue sky. I think obviously there's been a lot of talk about quantum computing, the speed and the capabilities of processing down the road with physics that probably hasn't been discovered yet. I think all of that stuff is going to completely change the way we even interface with any of this stuff. But I think that the reinvention or recalibration of the operating system to be a much more of a personalized thing rather than a fundamental base layer of computing.
Who are some of your biggest creative inspirations? Is in people or places or things that you read? Like, where do you go to find creativity, or who has really inspired you in your career?
So I think luckily I've found mentors in different ways, different aspects of my work in a lot of the people you mentioned. Just because I have managed to collaborate with them does not change the fact that I still look up to them a lot. Folks like AR and Will and Idris, I try to learn as much as I can from their respective multifaceted creative journeys. The weirdly cool and interesting thing about all of this is that the more I get to know some of those folks, the more I realize that there is no single thing that they are like. There's no single thing that they're only good at. They're good at so many different things, and it's not about just being good at them. They're passionate about so many different areas, and the incessant need to to test themselves and test their abilities in those different verticals through a creative lens, I think is something that I resonate with, and it's cool to just find that there are other people out there like that. So I'd say those guys for sure. And then it's not really like necessarily individual people or places, but I think products. I'm just a product person, you know, at heart. That doesn't necessarily mean something physical or digital. It can also be a song or a film or anything that is the kind of cocktail of ideas and influences and people's inputs. You know, I think for me, the final product and knowing that this is something that people spent time on and then they decided it was done, and then now I've consumed it and it's kind of like blossomed into this whole new kind of bouquet of ideas. Like that for me is true artistry and like true mastery of your craft, to be able to kind of give a very simple consumable package to somebody and for them to then have, you know, a kind of universe of ideas open up and questions open up in their own minds. So I kind of look at those things and I just consume a lot, to be honest.
I was going to say, how do you organise that? How do you keep abreast of latest developments? Do you have like your own kind of, not RSS feed, because that's old school, but is there like a particular publication or Substacks you read or anything like that? Where I wanted to talk to you about a professional philosophy of yours, which is replacing DEI, that is, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion, with what you call CEI, create equality instead. So, firstly, could you explain what it is, and secondly, you know, why this is important to you in your approach?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't say, you know, my mission has been to replace DEI. I think it's just more of a reaction to what I'm seeing go on quite a lot in recent times, which, you know, you can argue where it stems from or whatever, but the truth is that I think we're in a period right now where things are very polarized. A lot of people are U-turning, I think, on some of their commitments around DEI and stripping down processes, stripping down teams that were built around this stuff. And look, I'm not here to point blame in any direction. I think as a reasonable person, I think everybody can accept that there are folks on both polarized ends of these conversations which are rightfully frustrated about, you know, there needing to be a process in the first place that determines this stuff, or people unfairly or fairly getting a position regardless of why you think they're getting it, whether it's ethnicity or background or socioeconomic circumstances, whatever. All I know is that growing up and in my career, throughout my career, there has been for me a lived experience of me not quite being the right person for a particular thing, or being perfectly the right person for the thing, but as I walk in, there not being a lot of other people that look, sound, or have seen the things that I've seen or whatever. Now, that's not to say that the right people are not in the room already, right? I am a huge believer that, you know, it is about best idea wins, as I mentioned earlier, you know, whoever can do the best job. But I can understand the frustration that people have had around, like, there needing to be entire processes, laws, rules, whatever, around this stuff. So my idea is very simple. I'm like, that's cool. If we're going to start stripping stuff away, if we're going to start doing all that stuff, then I think it's not about a process. It's just about a very simple, very human underlying philosophy and approach to how you build stuff that people consume. It's to create equality instead. If you can take the argument that every single thing that we make, whether it's music, film, products, brands, whatever, we hope that it reaches the widest audience, and the majority of people that can consume it regardless of any of those other things, then you have to start thinking about how we make those things and how we produce those things, and the fact that everybody who could possibly consume it should probably be at least represented in some way in the making of it. And so that's kind of really the philosophy in a nutshell is, hey, the folks that are going to consume this stuff in the very capitalist consumer way of consuming it, those people there needs to be a representation of that person on the inside as we're crafting it. Otherwise, you can't rightfully say that you think it will reach all of those people in that meaningful way that you intend. So I'm just here to kind of really advocate, I think, for ensuring that there are voices at the table when it comes to actually building the stuff, but with a lens on that horizon of, as we bring stuff to market, those two sides of the fence need to look similar.
Okay, yeah. And so it's a philosophy, but you are actually applying it in your work.
In my work, I am, absolutely, because I think, again, it's, the Acuna wallet's a great example. Like, Stellar Development Foundation are based in California, I think San Francisco. They're a blockchain business. They have their own currency and all the rest of it, but that's not being used on Acuna wallet. But they're folks who have largely been based and grown up in San Francisco. Myself and Idris have been born and raised in the UK. Although Idris spent a lot of time in Africa, although my mum grew up in Africa, in Malawi, like, none of us are really facing those issues every single day. So can we reasonably build a digital tool that needs to touch multiple countries in Africa without having folks from Africa contribute to the business side of it, the engineering side of it, the design side of it? I would argue no, right? And there are competitors or other entities that have said, yeah, we'll build it and we'll deploy it there. But we've taken a very different stance. We're like, okay, we actually want the leaders in the organization to be boots on the ground. The managing director is there in Ghana. There is an effort to erect an engineering team from that region. And so it's really just the intent of like, okay, fine, we don't have to start building processes around it, but let's just be sensible about what we're making and why, and then who's making it. And that's really something that I think, we intend to continue.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And I see you've spoken out a bit or added to the conversation around IP issues in the creative industries. So under the UK's current legal framework, tech companies can use artists' work for training purposes. They don't need explicit permission or payment unless creatives have opted out of that. And there was this protest recently among the leading UK newspapers, the Make It Fair campaign, where they all splashed with that slogan on their front page, uniting in their call basically for fairer compensation and greater transparency in how creative works are used. I was curious what your thoughts are on this. It doesn't have to be a completely polarized, obviously, position, but it's quite a complicated issue, and I feel like it would be good to hear from you as a creative what you think, really.
Yeah, again, I feel like a lot of this stuff, I do feel like a lot of this stuff will shake out and figure itself out at the right time. But I think I completely understand why many of my peers, I think, have taken part in that campaign, and it was inevitable. I think anybody who's been watching any of the news around sort of the AI models and stuff, and music was the focus there, but Suno and Udio both getting sued at a certain time, maybe still are, by a bunch of labels. But here's my point on this, is that those very same entities are at the same time trying to cut deals with those companies who have these models. And the way that I speak about this is really just more of kind of like a historic thing with the creative industries, including music, many of my peers, and myself included. I used to consult for a company called Record Union, which is one of the first distributors to Spotify, and they were in the same building, literally. And I remember that at the time, Spotify was emerging as like a really cool outlet for independent musicians, but then that was a growing audience, and people who were signed could see that actually there's all these independent musicians on this platform called Spotify who are now entering the charts, and nobody's ever heard of them before. You're my label, like how come I'm not on Spotify? And Spotify were being sued at the time, or under legal pressure from these labels who felt that they were kind of undermining the value of music, right? And at the time it was $7.99, $9.99, maybe more for an album, a digital album. That was down from like $15.99 or whatever from when it was CDs. So already there was this decline of value of music. Then eventually, whatever deals were struck, and now, from that point onwards, labels were first of all fine to distribute on Spotify and other similar platforms. Later became more influential in actually what was being selected and featured there, and now you even have ads from label artists on Spotify, and it's almost like what gets released and what gets spotlight every week is still up to Spotify, but they have some preferences for labels. And of course, everyone's screaming from the mountaintops about how people like James Blake, about how it's unsustainable for an artist to even have a career if their only outlet is digital streaming. So in that scenario, the artists kept turning to the labels and kept turning to the publishers. And ultimately, coming from the background I come from in this sort of music tech or creative tech space, I can't quite get my head around why, as a coalition of creatives, we didn't just go, oh, labels are cool, but now there's another outlet that perhaps doesn't even require labels or requires them in a very different way to what they do currently. Let's us just go and cut a deal and own a piece of the technology that's emerging and offer our content, our IP to these platforms, right? And maybe in another universe, like that's what happened, and artists had fair compensation, but also had a fair piece of the technologies that were distributing their music, and labels were administrative organizations. I think that as a encapsulated lesson for me is indicative of what's happening now, where labels are suing these models, Suno and Udio and everyone else, for training on the music that they own or have signed from artists. But really artists, especially independent ones, there's nothing restricting them from going to these labels and saying, hey, you can train on my music, or how about this, I'll just write a bunch of music that you can train on for a fair compensation or for for a piece of the pie. And moreover, I know that with my reputation and my skill set, that there will be an audience who will want to use my agent or my model to assist in their music making process, or have my agent or my model score their film or their podcast or whatever. Those conversations are happening, but I think that we're finding ourselves in the same position where we're complaining almost about the wrong people and to the wrong people. And instead, there's a real opportunity to fundamentally change the infrastructure around these creative industries by realizing that actually the fuel and the source for tech companies and labels and distributors and studios alike are the creative IP. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Fantastic, fantastic answer.
Sorry, long answer.
And you mentioned James Blake there. He seems to be leading the charge in taking control of this. So, I mean, he's co-founded or launched Vaults, which is a decentralized streaming platform where he releases his now independent music because he's moved away from major labels. And he's also joined a platform called Indify, where he has been able to, on advice and through the technology that this platform provides, handpick his own management, people who sort out his sync deals, and he gets a way better share in revenue. And so he's really taking control there. And then I suppose to your point about artists almost creating a repository where their music could be used in training. You've got people like FKA Twigs.
Yeah.
She's creating a kind of AI twin of her.
I think Grimes also did this a while ago.
Grimes, yes, with the Elf tech, where you can essentially, it's like a plugin, and you can use her voice on top of your track. So there, there are like a handful of major artists experimenting, which I would say is in the right way. Would you say you kind of broadly agree with what they're doing? And do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I love what they're doing, and I think it's folks who can do that. You have to remember a lot of. And
do you think you have to, in a way, it needs to come from these big names to
I think so.
Change?
I think it's about volume though, and I think honestly, I've signed a deal with Universal Music Publishing, and and that's on the publishing side, but anybody who's in a record deal or whatever, these deals are binding. And so there's only so much that a lot of these artists can do. Like, I know I'm saying that, a lot of them would turn to you and go, okay, but I can't do that because it's not within the bounds of my contract. I can't just go and start licensing my music to other people, which is completely correct.
So I suppose James Blake bided his time, and then
yeah, exactly.
Once it expired, he could go off and be independent.
Right,
yeah.
But what I think the point I'm trying to make is, look, all of this stuff is moving very quickly and people can't just exit their deal. Some people can afford to or whatever, but so it's not taking shots at my own people. I actually think the contrary. I think it's more about us really thinking about what we need out of the industry, not the mechanism of the industry is this, and so we have to comply by doing, this. I think it's more like, what do we need the industry to be? How do we need it to change? What tools do we need? And then it's just about, I think, kind of, collectively pushing in a direction. I think James Blake's example is a great one because, yes, he's doing it independently, but he's also showing, I think, folks that almost in the same kind of 360 deal you might sign, there's a 360 way of doing it through direct relationships in these ways. There's another platform that he works with called B-Side, who I've been speaking to recently, and they are handling his sort of live show aspect of things. So he's earning so much more of a percentage from the live shows as a result of partnering with a platform that allows him to directly access folks who are likely to come to his gigs. There's all of these things that are out there, but of course, if you aggregate all of that and go to one entity and pay them or loan them or whatever you want to call it, you get into an agreement with them. You're essentially paying for a service, right? And that service, I think, has been industrialized by the music industry and film industries and so on.
Yeah, because he was saying, like, when you sign perhaps to a major label, it's that 360 deal. It's not bespoke. It doesn't cater to your individual needs as an act, whereas what he's doing now is kind of hand-picking the bits that he couldn't formally do when he was, signed.
Everything comes with risk, and this, what that awakening, if you like, of like some of these artists who have started to speak out about it, and many people know it, but the ones who've spoken out about it, I think for some of us who've kind of bridged technology or startup the world or business world and music or creative industries, recognize that it's no different to you going to a VC to raise a round for your startup. Like, now you are also beholden to a board, and although you can largely follow the roadmap that you presented to them and maybe change lanes from time to time, the truth is, if the results don't match, you'll be strong-armed in some way to fixing the problem through gentle or even firm advice on what you should do next. Otherwise, there will be consequences also, right? And so it's a loan. It's a loan in many ways, and in the music industry, that same thing. It's like, yes, we'll sign you. You're super talented. We love everything you're doing. But if everything you're doing doesn't start to either yield the results that we expect for the advance that we've given you, or if we see something else come from left field that feels like it could be more, it could be better for our business, then we might start nudging you in these directions to try and strategically, maximize the revenue. Like it's like every other industry. I think we're just blinded sometimes by the fact that it's got creative or plastered on the building. And it makes us feel like it should operate differently.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, what are your ambitions for this year in your creative professional career? And I'm limiting it to this year because I just feel like you do so much. It's just a way to narrow it down.
This year is already looking so crazy, and I turned 40, believe it or not, this year.
Wow.
So I'm already having...
As in you have already turned 40?
No, I turned 40 on May the 1st. So hopefully shortly after this comes out. And so I almost feel like the midlife crisis is so upon me that I'm like trying to pack in all of my creative endeavors into the next 30 days, just in case I have a complete meltdown. But no, I think this year, I haven't had the opportunity really to release music in a big way independently. It's always been work for other folks. So this year I really hope to try and like release a project that is me and my sound and my friend Tushar, we have a group called the Dualists, and I hope that we get to put out the music that we've been working on for so many years and tweaking and tuning, and have an actual music product release that I'm as proud of as all of the other product releases. That's on the music side, but I also hope that the way that I've been working to really bring together all of my endeavors in music and technology and other creative endeavors like immersive installations and things that I've been working on, brand campaigns, and try and find a way to, I think, fuse that into a body of work that I feel represents me as a creative, that people can reference and go, that actually looks like something that Manon produced or Manon made, and that's really just about, I think, me personally feeling like to the point that the gentleman from Studio Ghibli had, like having this kind of signature approach to things that that make it unique, and I think uniquely consumable and uniquely creative.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the fruits of your labour. and for clarity, your sort of solo artist name is Manon Dave, right?
Yeah. So the music that's coming out is under the Dualists, and the Dualists are myself and amazing producer songwriter called Tushar Apte, who's written some of your favorite songs from Chris Brown and Nicki Minaj and BTS, and we have this duo that we've got to collaborate some really awesome artists and people that you definitely know and love, and the first single comes out hopefully within a couple of months. Release date to be determined, but watch out this year for the Dualists.
Great. Really, really looking forward to this. And thank you so much for coming on, Manon.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Makers Memo. I hope you enjoyed our conversation at the intersection of art and technology. If you found value in today's episode, please make sure you subscribe, like, leave a comment or review, and share the content with fellow creatives.